Hey guys, welcome back to the Real Southern Garden, and today is another episode of Garden Life. Just going to show you what the gardens are looking like, a little bit of a garden tour, and show you what an everyday morning looks like here in late summer, early fall. So we've got to get coffee, of course, first thing that we've got to do. And we always look out at the bird feeder, see if any of the squirrels are out. Looks like there's a chipmunk. You can barely see him in the shot. But we are having tons of hummingbird activity as they get ready to migrate. They are really soaking up this sugar water. And it's also the time of the corn moon or the harvest moon, and boy, has it been beautiful the last few nights. My garden is getting the butternut squash ready. We've had lots of bouquets to bring in from the cut flower garden. But let's head out and do a little work in the rose garden, and let me show you around the property. So I'm always needing to deadhead, as you can imagine, and I get behind on it, of course. But the two most important things to keep the rose garden going are making sure that it has adequate moisture, that it is getting watered, and that I'm fertilizing it. And it can kind of make it through the rest. If I don't get to pull a weed here or there, or maybe I don't get to deadhead quite as often as I like, it'll still pull through okay as long as I do those things. And this was a very, very windy day. And sometimes we do get this kind of weather in the fall. It really dries everything out, which is somewhat unfortunate because we haven't had rain here in a while. And so I'm having to go around and water things by hand and make sure that everything is irrigated. Even our little cowbell here rings by itself when it's this windy. The impatiens up around the bell are still looking fabulous. Loving how those are doing this late in the season. But back to the rose garden. Now I'm going to give you guys a full rose garden tour here in the fall coming up very soon. And I'm going to go over which of the new roses that I put in the garden this year did well, which ones were able to stand up to the south. There's some winners, there's some losers. I am pretty pleased with how the rose garden did overall this year. I really just made sure to fertilize it. Obviously had to keep it watered, but I didn't have a ton of pressure with disease or pests this year. I didn't even have any Japanese beetles. And I think that was because it was so wet in June. I don't know, something happened, but they just were not out this year, so we'll take it. So we're going to do a little bit of watering, then I'm going to take you guys up to the chickens and show you the chickens and the big garden, and we'll make our way around the property. One thing about this is I don't have irrigation set up. Maybe someday, I don't know, but I have to be really careful with the rose garden because, as you know, they don't like to have overhead watering of any kind, and sprinklers are a no-no. They're a little bit more, tricky. Tomato plants don't like overhead watering either. Actually, a lot of plants don't, but roses really aren't going to do well for you if you are overhead watering them or using any kind of sprinkler system, unless it's really way down at the base of the plant. Now, when I worked for the online rose nursery, that was one of the problems we ran into a lot, is that people were just watering overhead, and you find out pretty quick if you grow roses that you just can't do that. And here are two of my favorite little tomato plants right there on the side. They have been producing so well. I'm going to share that variety with you guys here coming up not too much longer. They're just a stellar tomato variety, no disease, probably pumped out a couple hundred tomatoes in high season. But let's let these chickens out. They have gotten so big. They're all laying for us. We're getting 7 eggs every day from these girls. And then we have another flock of 4 down on the lower level, which you guys haven't seen. They are laying too, so half of the flock is laying, but we are in egg paradise right now. And we're so thankful. We're eating lots of omelets. Pretty much every lunch is an omelet, and I'm not complaining. I love having my own food source right here on the property. If you're growing things that you can feed the chickens and you do it strategically, you could, in theory, save money. But the way that most people do it and the way that we do it, obviously we're paying a lot for chicken feed, but it's just the idea that we love to have our own eggs here on the property, and it makes it worth it for us. All right, into the big garden and the cutting garden we go. So you can see I've left all the zinnias up. They are turning brown at the bottom. They're still producing flowers. They just look ragged. That's how they are this time of year in the South, but I leave them for all the pollinators, all the butterflies that are trying to make their migration. I'm not gonna cut any of this stuff down. And then we have some really pretty sunflowers. These are some smaller ones, but they kind of have like a pink hue to the center. And they look really nice next to that pink zinnia right there. The Benary's giant zinnias are my favorites. If you've watched my channel for a while, you've heard me talk about them and sing their praises. But this is my vegetable garden and my cut flower garden. We've got a lot of sweet potatoes growing here, a lot of butternut squash, which are my favorite things to grow because I can keep them for so long in the basement. Having a little bit of trouble with some of the sweet potatoes this year, but I think I'm still going to do okay with the ones I have planted in different spots. The grow bag sweet potatoes, for some reason, are not doing well this year, but these guys up here seem to be doing a-okay. And then we grew these beautiful giant sunflowers again. Look how big they are. I've left them for the birds, and they're just drying naturally this way. And I'll just take the seeds out and use some for planting. Look how windy it is. Isn't that unreal? And I'll give some to the wildlife too. Lots of watermelon out here. They are not ripe yet. It's kind of tricky with watermelon, trying to get them just at the right time. Even when you think you're doing it right, looking for the tendril to be dry and all that, it can still be tricky. But look how tall this particular variety of cosmos grew. I have never had my zinnias or cosmos be taller than I am. And the very tippy top of these guys is taller than my hat. So they really did well this year. I love to watch them dancing in this wind. And check out that clear blue sky with just a little bit of clouds overhead. It is so beautiful. Now these Benary giants, these giant orange zinnias, are some of my absolute favorites, and that's why I planted so many of them, because I use them for late season bouquets, and they are just so strong. I mean, they're one of the best varieties I think out there. They're just called Benary's giant orange. They are pretty resistant to powdery mildew. As you can see, they're looking a lot better than the other varieties are that are along that fence line that I showed you. And these have not been babied. I'd like to say that I don't ever overhead water back here, but sometimes I do because I just don't have any other way to water back there. So I don't have the soaker hoses out. There's a lot of twists and turns and that you got to make to get around that big garden from our irrigation. So it is what it is, but the zinnias are doing pretty well. So back here are my tea olives, and they are blooming and they smell so good. It's kind of like an orangey magnolia, jasmine smell all mixed up together. And these bloom 9 months out of the year, and they make the entire acreage up here, I mean, several acres, just smell so sweet. They're one of my favorite plants. I'm gonna have to do a video on that soon and let you guys know exactly what variety to buy, at least my opinion. And then coming up on the right, those are the Confederate rose plants, and they start from the ground every single year and get about 10 feet tall. They are taller this year than they've been any other year so far, and I think it's because of all the rain we had in June, even though we had a drought after that, but they just got really, really tall. So let me take you by my favorite little tree, this crabapple tree, and then we're going to turn back around and check out the crepe myrtles. They are kind of winding down now. There's a few sporadic blooms left, and they're starting to turn colors. Their leaves are starting to turn their fall color. So fall is definitely creeping up on the way here. We're kind of that in-between time, late summer, early fall. And this little bed, I added some new plants to it this year. And the white Gora, you can see there's a bridal respirea in the back. There's a Confederate rose. There's my daughter. She's loving this weather. loving picking up leaves already. And of course, sweet little baby, she's growing and growing and growing, and she's loving being outside in this weather too. And then we're gonna head to the front porch, but I noticed that my climbing rose, this is my blush noisette, has fallen down off the arbor. And guys, I need to tie this back with jute string. I've been meaning to do this for so long. It's just one of those garden tasks that I just push back and for some reason never get done. I've got to do it. There's no excuse. Anyway, coming up here on the right, one of our old oak trees. That is one of the last trees on the property to get its leaves every year. So she'll be losing them very soon too. Then we've got all of the impatiens in this front flower bed. You can see the rebloom azaleas are blooming right now. Excuse the water hose. Like I said, I've had to do some strategic watering lately. And then the hydrangeas are on their last little leg. They're starting to really show their age. And it's been a kind of a rough summer for them. I mean, hydrangeas love moisture. They don't like drought. So anytime you get a season like that, you know, they're going to take a beating. One of the first things that tells me that fall is on the way, and I noticed this even when I was living out on the West Coast in California for about a decade, is the way that the sun starts to kind of shine at a different angle. And of course, the Earth's rotation causes it, as we all know, but it seems like it almost happens overnight. Everything lights up a little bit different. So we're gonna head over to the front yard and I'm gonna show you what's going on up there. Now my girls are downstairs with my mom in the basement so that I can finish this video, and it is just so helpful that I have her. She is just amazing. And then these are our crinium lilies, and you can see there's a couple blooms still, but they're just nice and green along the fence line. The Rose of Sharon, this is the Poly Petite variety. They are still blooming, but they're starting to slow down. They know as well that fall is on the way. And then we had a tree that we had to take down. We had a big dead tree over here in this wild area, and my husband took it down, and it was, what's the word? Quite a hair-raising experience, as my dad would have said. Anytime you're taking a tree down, I don't know, I'm always worried something's gonna happen, and oh my goodness, but everything turned out fantastic, and he knew what he was doing. But the wild area, as you can see with the border of hydrangeas and the echo azaleas, it has grown up a lot in the middle, but there's still a border that I've kept weeded, and I'm gonna mulch it, which is gonna help a lot too. But when we took that tree down, that entire area, we just have a lot of cleanup to do over there. So my mama, this is her back porch. Let me show you this really quick before we head to the forest and see the creek. She's got some really gorgeous containers, all different kinds. She has, of course, a hibiscus, an annual hibiscus type on the left. Her basil is doing so well down here, and it's in a lot more shade than mine is. So we use hers for spaghetti and lasagna and all the meals because hers is fresh, and the one I have upstairs, I've just left it for the pollinators, but it has gone to seed and it is really dried. It's dried basil at this point, which you could still use. It's just a little bit bitter since it went to seed. But let me show you what is going on down here near the forest line. You can see the leaves are already on the ground and they're already all crunchy as you walk. The creek has got a little bit of water in it, but it doesn't have a ton. And this forest area is where all the birds and all the animals go in the heat of the summer. You know, they stay back here until the sun starts to go down behind the tree line. But right now, there's a lot more activity with the squirrels and the birds. They're not back here as often because it's not as hot. And the katydids, of course, they're not singing like they were. You know, it's always been such a jarring thing and such an interesting thing living in the South as a kid. And now, of course, that the katydids just turn it off. When it gets down to the 80s, you don't hear the locusts. You don't hear as many of the nighttime sounds or the chattering that they make during the day either. It's wild how it almost happens overnight. Then we're just gonna pan around real quick. We're gonna pass by the barn, and then we're gonna head back up the hill towards the tulip poplar tree and the old oaks in the front yard. Now the tulip poplar, this guy that you're looking at right here, is one of the absolute tallest trees in Georgia. And we have one right in the middle of our front yard. And here's a little hummingbird again, getting some sugar water, getting fueled up for the migration. This hummingbird feeder is a brand new one. I will put the name of the company that makes it if you're interested. They have all different kinds of blown glass hummingbird feeders. And they're really great quality. They're easy to clean, which is one of the most important things. And they're different. They're not just like your regular hummingbird feeder. And so I'll put that in the description if you're interested in trying out one of those. There are so many birds right now migrating, hummingbirds and other birds. And of course, you can attract a lot to your feeder. So while we're over here by the hummingbird feeder, I'm going to go ahead and fill up the regular bird feeder with some sunflower seeds. And I'm also going to fill up our little bluebird feeder with some mealworms. I buy either Grubterra or the KT brand. I get them on Amazon because they are just cheaper there than they are at any of the big box stores. And as far as sunflower seeds, the cheapest place to get those, we get 40-pound bags from Walmart, and they are significantly less expensive at Walmart. And then over here in my little display area, display garden as I always call it, there's a lot of leaves on that bench. I just blew them off the other day, but they're already back. I have a little bit of cleanup to do, getting rid of some of the pots that don't have annuals living in them anymore, and just getting things ready for fall. I am of course going to do some mums. I always do. I actually really like the smell of mums. To me, they just remind me of fall. And then this ornamental cherry tree, it's always the first one to start getting yellow leaves and start to drop its leaves. And boy, it's beautiful in the spring as well. So she's a fun little tree to have, even if she is messy. And then as the day winds down, you can hear the cardinals in the background. I'm going to leave the background volume up here. They're the last birds to visit my bird feeder every single night, and the first ones in the morning. Look at that gorgeous corn moon. Isn't that just stunning? Thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you back here next time in the next video right here at the Real Southern Garden. Happy almost fall.